The official talk here today. I'm Mark Gilfix from Gilfix and Lapole Associates. What is the subject here today? Prop 19, the demise of Prop 13 in California, Prop 19, and what you can do about it. Again, I'm Mark Gilfix at Gilfix and Lapole Associates. And as we get started in this, I want you to take a moment and just think about why you're here today. What got you to join me for this talk? Um, Do you own a home in California? Do you own a rental property? Do you want to preserve it for your children and your grandchildren or your nieces and your nephews? Are you worried about how the world is changing these days? We are hearing from all of our clients there's so much worry and stress out there about what's happening. Are you worried about AI and its impact on your family, your kids, your grandkids, their ability to support themselves? And are you just worried about how things are changing in the world, how taxes are changing? Do you feel overwhelmed? Um, there are a few high leverage moments in life when it comes to planning, and this is one of them. We don't want you to miss this opportunity. Prop 19, if you own property in California, Prop 19 is the biggest issue you and your family might face. So we want you to understand what it is and to take action. Um, so let's go through what we're going to talk about here today. And it's not that much, but it's really, really important. So we're going to talk about a review of what Prop 19 is. We're going to go through, will it be repealed? There's some major, major updates there. Is there a chance Prop 19 could just go away? How does Prop 19, as it currently stands, impact your home? How does it impact a rental? I want to talk about three big mistakes that families make when it comes to planning for Prop 19 or not planning. And then we'll talk about what you can do to protect your families, your properties from multiple generations. And I have to point out, this is for educational purposes only. This is not legal advice. This is meant to inform and empower you. For us to give you legal advice, we have to work with you formally and really understand your full situation. So be careful with what you do with all this. Don't try this stuff at home. But as we jump in, I think we can all relate to the idea that when we face big challenges in life, many of you may know I'm a cancer survivor. My wife is a cancer survivor. We have to let go of what we can't control and we have to focus on what we can. Prop 19 and preserving assets for your family, that's one of those issues. There is so much noise in the world and confusion out there. It is my mission today to give you some idea of what some of those issues are, but to give you some tools you can use to protect what you have. And I love something called the Serenity Prayer. You might be aware of this, but it's a simple prayer, whether you're religious or not. I think it's beautiful, and it's God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I'm going to display that right here. And how does it affect? What does that have to do with Prop 19? Prop 19 is a crazy new law among many other crazy laws. And a lot of us just feel like, oh my gosh, what can I do about it? There's actually a lot that we can do about it. There's actually a lot. So let's have that wisdom to know that this is one of those areas where we can control things. And family assets, the family home or a family rental, those are so core to who we are and to preserving abundance and making sure that our kids and our grandkids are safe. That I want you to take out of this. Hope is not a strategy, and let's control what we can control. Hope for change in law, change in taxes, change in situation, that is not a strategy. Let's control what we can control. And so Prop 19, that's an issue that you might not think you have any control over. You do. And I'm going to talk about that. So what is Prop 19? Well, Prop 19 is now part of the California Constitution, believe it or not. It was passed by voter initiative in the 2020 election, and it essentially undid Prop 58. Now, so Prop 13 still exists. Prop 13 still limits property tax increases to about 2% per year, as long as you're living, as long as you hold on to a property. But what Prop 19 undid was not actually Prop 13, but it undid Prop 58. So Prop 58 was passed in the mid or early 80s by a huge majority of voters, and it essentially allowed parents to pass their primary residence plus up to $1 million in assessed value properties in rentals or a second home, whatever, to their kids with no change in property taxes. So essentially, it allowed Prop 13 to exist between parents and their children. Prop 19 gutted this. It essentially ended, well, it literally ended Prop 58. Many of you might be aware of this, but I think it's important to go over the details again. Prop 19 essentially undid Prop 13 protections when properties go from mom and dad to their kids. That's a really important concept. Prop 13 does exist, but this is essentially an attack on Prop 13 for California families that want to stay here for more than one generation. So let's go into some details of how Prop 19 affects the primary residence and how it affects the rentals or a vacation home or second property if you're fortunate enough to have that. Let's go to some details here. So Prop 19 essentially guts property tax protections between generations. And there's a lot of misconceptions out there. I think when Prop 19 passed, people assumed that, oh, well, my home is at least protected. And that's not true. There's some limited protections from reassessments for the primary residence, but there are no protections for rentals or business property or anything like that. They're fully exposed to reassessments when they pass from parents to children. So some details here. So before February 16, 2021, when Prop 19 became law, mom and dad parents could pass their primary residence to their kids, no change in property taxes. It didn't matter if the kids lived there, it didn't matter how much the house was worth, it didn't matter how much the gap between the assessed value used to calculate property taxes was versus the fair market value was. No matter what, kids got to take mom and dad's house and keep it in the family with the same property taxes. In addition to that, the former law allowed you to pass up to $1 million in assessed value property, not fair market, but assessed value property to your kids with no change in property taxes. So you could have, a fourplex or a duplex worth $2 million, but if the assessed value was $1 million, that would be fully protected, would go to the kids. What happens now, as you can see, as of February 16th, 2021, this is all gone. The primary residence now has very limited protections, and only if a child lives there within 1 year of mom and dad passing away. So for the primary residence, if it's mom and dad's house, if mom and dad, if it's not their residence anymore, there are no protections. If it was mom and dad's residence, and if one or more children live in the house after mom and dad pass away, $1 million in fair market value of the house is protected from a reassessment. I'll give some specific examples, but let's imagine a $2 million house with a $500,000 assessed value. If mom and dad pass away, goes to their kids, if their kids move in, you take the $500,000 assessed value, add $1 million to that, $1.5 million, that would be protected from a reassessment. But if the house is worth $2 million, that leaves $500,000 still exposed to reassessment. Property taxes would go up by $7,000 per year. And your kids have to live in the house. And technically, if they ever move out of the house and the county finds out about it, the house could be reassessed again at that point. The law didn't really clarify what happens then. We're exploring how different counties are treating that. But the bottom line is protections for the primary residents have been gutted. And if you live in coastal California, the Bay Area, San Diego, Los Angeles County, or any areas where property values are quite high, at $1 million in protection, it's nice, but it might not be even close to enough to allow your kids to afford property taxes after you're gone. And for rental properties, second properties, if you have a cabin up in Tahoe, whatever, very simple now, zero protections from reassessments, unless you plan. I'll talk about what we can do about that later. There are ways to prevent this. But if you don't plan, your primary residence has limited protections. Second, if you're fortunate enough to have rental properties or other properties in California, zero protections from reassessment, whatever they are worth. On the day that mom and dad pass away or the day they give it to their kids, full reassessment. Property taxes are reset at whatever the property is worth. And in many cases, these increases can be 500%, 1,000%. And we've seen literally 5,000% increases in property taxes. So I want to now talk about an issue. We get questions about this all the time. Will Prop 19 be repealed? Very simple. Will Prop 19 be repealed? And there's actually a pretty simple answer. No, it's not going to be repealed. We know a lot of people were working on an effort. The Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association was collecting signatures to place a repeal of Prop 19 on the 2024 ballot. They just announced very recently that the efforts failed. There was a February deadline for getting signatures. They needed about 860,000 signatures. They got, I think, 560,000 signatures. They were well short. So what does this mean? It means that Prop 19 is going to remain law. Remember what I said earlier, hope is not a strategy. Hope for repeal is not a strategy. I met with many families over the last few months where we discussed the fact that Prop 19 was a major issue for them, but they were, and I get this, they were waiting to see, well, maybe it'll be repealed. Let's wait and see what happens. Well, we know what's happening. Prop 19 is not going anywhere. And I think every year that passes makes it less likely it will be repealed. Now, could it be repealed in the future? I suppose it's possible, but it is a big uphill climb, and don't rely on California voters, the California government to bail you out. Hope is not a strategy. Let's control what we can control. So I'm going to go through some more details here about the impact of Prop 19 and then some mistakes people make about it and then what you can do about it. Because we've worked with a lot of families on this, and there's a lot we can do. And I also want to flag some other concerns that I have, that our firm has, about other California laws. Let's just be clear here. Prop 19 is one of many developments in California law. And so we know in the 2024 election, so let's talk about some key 2024 California propositions and tax measures. So we know Prop 19 is not going to be on the ballot. There will be no repeal. But what is on the ballot? There are going to be two ballot measures that I think should be very concerning to any Californian who's worried about taxes or is worried about owning property in the state. So one, we see rent control spreading all over the state. Some cities in the East Bay just passed rent control. Santa Monica, California just enhanced their rent control to make it basically impossible to ever evict somebody, and it's just getting very tough. Now, if you're a renter, maybe you like some of these. I do have concerns, even if you're a renter. I think a lot of these are really bad for renters long term. Imagine you have a psychotic neighbor with multiple pit bulls. Good luck trying to evict them in California, or at least in some cities now. And I'm worried about what this means for the future development of housing in California. But not only is Prop 19 not going to be on the ballot, and rent control is spreading. That's not really on the ballot, but there is an effort to repeal Costa-Hawkins. The Costa-Hawkins Act that was passed in the early 90s. It's called Justice for Renters, and that is going to be on the ballot. So what does it mean? So Costa-Hawkins, and that's not the key subject of this talk here. Costa-Hawkins prevents rent control for single-family homes in California. So even if you live in Santa Monica or San Francisco or Berkeley, if it's a single-family home, there is no rent control. And for apartment buildings built, I think, after 1995, there can be no rent control. The Justice for Renters Act, which will be, I think it might be Proposition 10. I'm not sure what it will be, but it will be on the ballot. That is an effort to repeal even these protections. So this means even single family homes could have rent control. So let's add this to Prop 19. So if you don't plan for Prop 19, imagine a future where you're trying to leave a rental property to your kids. They're not allowed to raise rents for any purpose, really, or they're limited to 2% of your rent increase. Go up 10,000%. What are you going to do? Does that become a completely worthless asset if the cash flow goes negative? So when we see other efforts to really undermine, I think, property rights in California, it's a very debatable area. I know a lot of people feel very, very passionately about protecting renters more. I think talk to any economist and they would tell you that rent controls, it helps a small group of people and it hurts a lot more. But hey, the political winds are what they are. I can't predict what they'll be, but I do know that Prop 19 won't be repealed. And there are some very concerning developments that make planning for Prop 19 even more important, because if property taxes go up, it's going to be harder and harder for your family to hold on to properties or to make any money with them. They might be forced to lose money. Again, rent control plus tax increases. If you don't plan ahead, literally, I could see rental properties becoming negative assets, like costing your family money. So let's talk about some of the solutions or some of the things you don't need a lawyer for. If you want to protect a property from a tax increase, what can you do where you don't need an expert and you don't need a lawyer? Well, this is actually a really important issue. I've had some clients come in, they're worried about property taxes, and they have a longtime partner, right? And they're not married, but they live together. And maybe one partner owns the house, the other just lives there, and they want the house to be there for their partner. Really important. And this actually isn't directly related to Prop 19, but get married. If you want your property available for your partner and you're not married and you're worried about massive property tax increases, if you get married, there is an exemption. There's no reassessment of properties when a property from one spouse to the other. So that's just kind of a fun side tip. Not really Prop 19 directly related, but one way to protect increases. Again, if you're in a long-time partnership and you're comfortable with this, there's a lot of other implications here. You need to be aware of this. There are reassessments when properties go from one unmarried or to another. Let's talk about, though, what's at stake. The numbers are absolute. A $3.3 million home. I know 3.3 million is a big number, but in many parts of California, that's like a 4-bedroom standard house. And the numbers, maybe it's a 1.5 million or 4 million, whatever. I'm using this number just to make a point. So let's imagine a $3.3 million home with an assessed value of $300,000. So mom and dad bought it, 35 years ago for $200,000. And now they're fortunate to be in Silicon Valley or San Diego or West LA or something like that, where values have gone up. And believe it or not, their house is now worth 3.3 million, but the assessed value for Prop 13 keeps the assessed value low is $300,000. Mom and dad pass away and their kids move in. They live in the house. You might be thinking, oh, well, the property tax increase can't be that big, right? Wrong. The property tax increase can be absolutely massive because remember, Prop 19 only protects $1 million in market value from a reassessment. So what does that mean for a house that's worth 3.3 million and $300,000? If they don't do any planning ahead of time, this means the property tax increases would be about $22,000 a year. You take $300,000, first million is protected in fair market value beyond that. So the first 1.3 million is not reassessed because the kids are living there. That still leaves $2 million in value exposed to reassessments. Property tax is about 1.1, 1.2%. This is rough. It's different in different counties. $22,000 per year in tax increases per year. And those go up at 2% per year because Prop 13 then does kick in. But 2% of $22,000 is a lot bigger than 2% of $3,300, which is what the mom and dad were paying in property taxes. So over time, over 5 years, that's over $114,000. Over 10 years, that's over $240,000. Over 30 years, the kids just hold on to the house. That's almost $900,000 in property tax increases. And keep in mind, property taxes are largely not deductible from income taxes. You can only deduct a small portion of that. So think about how much more your kids would have to earn just to simply hold on. They don't want to profit from it. They just want to live in your home. If you don't plan, they might have to earn an extra $1.2 million just to pay the higher taxes. It blows your mind how big these increases are. You could argue that Prop 19 was the biggest property tax increase in the history of America. I mean, if you really look at what it means when properties go from parents to kids, whether you think it's fair or not, it is a massive property tax increase. Let's talk about a property where a child doesn't live there, and this would also apply to rental properties. So rental property, zero protections, or the mom and dad's house. Let's say the kids aren't sure if they want to move in yet. Maybe they live in a different state. They might move in the future. You have 1 year to move in. If the kids don't move in within 1 year, this opportunities law, there's no protections. And if it's a rental property or a business property, again, no protections. So let's imagine that $3.3 million property. I get it. It's a big number, but you can adjust it down a little bit or up depending on the value of your properties. What does it mean in tax increases? Let's go back to the slide. It's staggering how big these property tax increases are. So again, if a family doesn't plan and a $3.3 million property goes from parents to kids that have a $300,000 assessed value, so it's quite low, it's held in the family for a while. Property taxes go from about $3,300 a year to over $36,000 per year. Yes, that is a 1,000% increase, a 10x increase in property taxes. And we work with a lot of families on this. That's not that uncommon for families to face that type of situation. If you're fortunate to have held properties for more than 20 or 30 years in California and you want your family to stay there, this is a huge issue. So over 5 years, that's $170,000 plus in extra property taxes. Over 20 years, that's over 800. We'll actually go just to call these out. So we're talking about one property If it happens to be in an area where values are high, we are talking in some families, and this is just illustrative, right? This is not every family, but just for this example, a $3.3 million house, $300,000 assessed value, $360,000 in extra taxes over 10 years, $800,000 over 20 years, and over 30 years, $1.38 million. And I was giving a in-person talk yesterday, and as I was talking, I was just like, even I was, when I go over these numbers, like, I can't believe them. So your kids have to be multimillionaires just to stay in a house, just to hold on to the house. And again, imagine a rental property facing $1 million increase in property taxes over the next few decades, while rent controls kicking in. You can't raise rents, property taxes could skyrocket. Big, big issue. And keep in mind also, property taxes are largely not deductible against income taxes. Now, if it's a rental, there's some ways they can be, but if it's a primary residence, currently only $10,000 in local tax, state and local taxes are deductible against income taxes. So you might have to earn an extra 1.7, 1.8, $2 million to pay this extra 1.38 million over 30 years. So I know I'm harping on this. I know I might be repetitive, and I apologize for that, but I think a lot of people don't quite grasp how big the impact of Prop 19 can be if you don't plan. Let's now talk. If you have questions, enter them in the Q&A function. I'm happy to go over some at the end. I now want to talk about some mistakes that we've seen. Big errors. The stakes are so high. These are multi-million-dollar issues. And we've seen some bad advice out there, some bad steps taken or lack of steps. Let's talk about 3 big mistakes that we've seen families make around Prop 19 planning. And let's go back to the slides. I think there's a lot here to unpack. So 3 big mistakes that we've seen. So some people said, oh, well, if I add my child to the title right now, maybe that'll protect it, because then when I'm gone, well, it's already in their name. No, adding your child the wrong way to title right now could result in a massive reassessment right now. And you might be giving up a big step up, and there's a capital gains tax issue you might be undermining. You might lose a stepped up basis. It could be a disaster. Do not just add your child to title. Technically, if you add them to title, that could be a transfer that could trigger a partial property tax reassessment. That is not a way to do it. Another one, gifting the house to your property, your child right now. You might say, okay, well, I'll just give it to them right now. Definitely don't do that. If you give it directly to them, there would be a full reassessment. Well, Prop 19 laws would apply. If you give it to your child now, there's not like an exception if you give it to them while you're alive. It's when it's transferred, or whether it's after you pass away or if it's transferred while you're living. Don't do that. And not only that, but your kids would lose a stepped up cost basis when you pass away. In other words, if you give the property to your kids while you're living, when they get that, they take your cost basis. So if they ever sell the property, they have to pay capital gains taxes based on what you paid for the property years or decades before. If it goes to them after you pass away, at least they get the benefit of a stepped up cost basis, meaning capital gains tax can go away. They still have a big property tax issue, but at least it solves a capital gains tax issue. And 3 is just no planning or improper planning. You think I have a living trust that's going to my kids. That'll prevent it, right? No, a living trust and most trusts will not protect your kids from a reassessment. Or people have said, well, I'm going to create a family entity, a family partnership, or an LLC. I hear that can do it. Don't try that at home. Like, please don't. We've seen some massive mistakes. If you play around with entities and do it wrong, there could be an immediate full reassessment, and you might be giving up other massive tax benefits, or you're probably not going to take into account capital gains or estate tax issues. Those are also really big. So don't make one of these mistakes. I think the biggest one is number 3. We see so many families who aren't aware of this. So first of all, just by watching this, you know more than about 98% of the California population about Prop 19. I still think there's mass misinformation and mass ignorance about this, so you're ahead of the game. But so many people just don't want to take action. Even people that meet with us, some of them are like, okay, I see the issue, I see your solutions, but I don't I'll wait. Like, just don't. But let's talk about some steps you can take that don't require a lawyer to protect your property from a massive reassessment. So what are 3 ways? Well, actually, no, one way you can do it without a lawyer, and then some other ways to solve the property tax issue that don't necessarily need. I think there's really 2 ways to deal with it without a lawyer. Let's talk about 2 ways that your kids can deal with property tax issues without involving expert help and just relying on themselves. So one, if it's your primary residence, your kids move in within a year, and at least they get the $1 million in protection. So after you pass away or after it goes to your kids, as long as your kids make it their residence, if it was yours, then they get that $1 million in protection. And depending on the value of your house and your assessed value, it might be enough, right? If you have an assessed value of 500,000 and the house is worth 1.5 million or less, no increase because your kids would get that $500,000 assessed value plus $1 million in protection, no increase. And even if the house is worth a little bit more, like 1.7 in that case, there will be a small reassessment, about 200,000 in fair market value exposed to a reassessment. So for many people in California, to be clear, that $1 million is enough to protect the house from that $1 million in protection, sorry, is enough to prevent the house from being reassessed when it goes from parents to children if the kids live there. Another solution is your kids just sell, right? So when they inherit, when you inherit a property from a parent or from anybody, if it was in their estate when they pass away, it gets a stepped up cost basis. So in other words, if the property is sold in the future, you don't have to report what your parents paid for it 30 years ago. It's just you tell the IRS what it was worth, 1.8 million, 2 million on the day that my parents passed away. I'm selling it for 2 million. You don't have to pay any capital gains taxes. You get a stepped up basis. That's a crucial concept. So if your kids inherit the house and they don't want to pay higher property taxes if you didn't plan ahead, well, they can just sell it and they don't have to pay capital gains taxes if your plan was set up properly. This, by the way, is why the California Realtors Association spent over $35 million to pass Prop 19. Why? Because they knew that when parents pass away and properties go from parents to children, kids get the house and then they see these massive property tax increases. What are they going to do? Many of them, they're going to sell because once the property taxes go up, they never go back down. It's virtually impossible to bring them back down. You have to plan ahead. So the California Realtors Association logically said, well, how can we get more houses on the market and get more work for realtors? And by the way, look at how few the inventory of houses for sale right now is crazy low. And that's with Prop 19 is law. So without Prop 19, it'd be even lower. So it affords people to sell. So you can always sell a house, pay minimal or no capital gains taxes, and there's no property tax increase because you sold. But even then, you have to pay a higher property tax rate before the house is sold. But most importantly, the way you can prevent this is to plan, to take action. There are ways to protect from property tax increases. And that's what I want to encourage you to do if this is an issue. How can we protect your home and your investment property from tax increases? Well, we, Gilfix and Lopole Associates, have created incredible solutions. And there's no one size fits all. It's different for every family. We have to take multiple tax issues into account. But we do have solutions, but it takes some time and it takes some work. We can prevent property tax increase. We can even add in asset protections for the next generation from divorce and from lawsuits. It's a pretty powerful type of solution, but we have to be aware of not just property taxes, but capital gains tax issues and estate tax issues. Our approach can work between parents and children, uncles and nieces. We take Prop 19 out of the equation. There are a number of ways that we can do this. So we've helped so many California families with this. And our techniques work. We know they work because they've gone through. But I think the main point I would make here is Prop 19 is not getting overturned. Maybe in 5 years, 10 years, who knows? It might never be repealed. And it certainly won't be repealed anytime soon. And if something happens to you, or if the property goes from you to your kids or your grandparents to your parents, or if your parents are going to leave it to you, if you don't plan ahead, hope is not a strategy. Don't rely on voters to bail you out. Prop 19 is law. It's going to remain law at least for the next few years and maybe indefinitely. We can prevent these increases. It takes planning, though. It takes time. When we help families, it typically takes a minimum of 6 months and up to a year to complete the process. There are ways to do it. And the stakes couldn't be higher. We talked about $600,000, $800,000 for one property and increased taxes. So should you meet with us, if you own a property in California and you want to leave it, or if you're concerned about this, talk to us. It doesn't mean you have to take action, but at least give us a chance to go over your situation. There's a lot we can do. We can solve this for you. We take into account capital gains taxes and estate taxes in doing this. We don't solve one problem and create another. We optimize it for you. So I want to circle back to what I said earlier. Hope is not a strategy. Control what you can control. And I have to point out this is a one-time opportunity because property taxes, again, once they go up, they never come back down. And you might think, well, my kids might not want to live in the house. They might sell it anyway and buy a different place with the proceeds. Well, if they buy a different place, those taxes are going to be much higher. So in many cases, holding on, protecting the primary residence in the Bay Area or LA, wherever you are, is the keeping low taxes the only way that your kid can stay in the area. We recently worked with a family where they have a house in Los Altos. Their daughter is a school teacher and they wanted her to be able to stay in the house. She's not trying to cash out and sell the house and move out of the area. She wants to just stay in the area and have a home for her two kids. That's it. She's not greedy. She just wants to stay in mom and dad's home. So we took steps to protect the property from an increase. We're still in the midst of it for them, but without doing that, there is no way she could have afforded the higher property taxes. So, I know there's a lot of debate about Prop 19. Some people think it's grossly unfair. Some people think it's very fair. I'm not here to make a judgment on that, other than I think it's very scary that a lot of families in certain parts of California might lose their homes, or the kids might not be able to even just stay in the family home as a result of this. But there are steps we can take. Hope is not a strategy. Control what we can control. And just to sum this up, of course, and I'm going to get some questions in a second. We have a few questions that have come in. But let's just go back to how you could, if you wanted to work with us, and we're happy to, we would welcome you to contact us if you're an existing client and you haven't explored this with us, talk to us. If you're not part of our client community, very easy to find us, Gilfix in La Pole, gilfix.com, 650-493-8070. Talk to us. We can very quickly go through your situation with you and identify what the tax increases would be and go through the different solutions. And again, there's no one size fits all solution, but we have to take action. And if you were looking at this a few months ago or you're aware of it and you're like, well, I might get repealed. Well, we already know Prop 19 is not getting repealed. So that's the big development. Prop 19 is not getting repealed. Hope for future change of Prop 19 is not a strategy. Let's control what we can control. And we would love to be part of your team about that. Now I have a bunch of questions. So again, let's just sum it up. Prop 19 not getting repealed. There are solutions out there. And without it, it could be a multi-million-dollar issue for your family. So let's go to some questions. So I have a question from, good question from Blake. I have 3 children. I think only one of them would stay in the home after we pass away. I want to protect things equally, but minimize property taxes while kids are living there. What happens if all 3 kids have an equal share in my house? So I'll just talk about generally. If you're leaving, many of our clients, the house is their biggest asset, right? So if they have multiple kids, the house has to be divided up between kids. We can absolutely still protect from a property tax increase and leave the house to multiple kids. After that, it's up to them to kind of figure out what they want to do. There's still ways to prevent property tax increases when it's transferred between siblings. We have to be very careful with that. But there absolutely are ways to protect multiple kids from property tax increases. But every situation is different, so we'd have to look at that. I do think that as long as one child's living there, we believe that property taxes wouldn't go up, even if it is owned by other kids as well. But we absolutely have solutions to protect, even if the property is going from parents to like 3 different kids. That's very common. Is agricultural land exempt from a reassessment? Or a question from Barbara. If it's part of your primary residence, there could be that partial protection, but I'm unaware of any exemptions for agricultural land. So don't quote me on that. There might be some exceptions there. We have worked with some families who had farmland. I don't think there are any exceptions for agricultural land unless it's part of the primary residence, in which case you'd have the $1 million in protection. But I don't think there's any exceptions for agricultural land. There's no exceptions for special needs kids. So if your child has a disability, no exception to prevent property taxes from going up there either. Another question, if you do the Prop 19 protection, can your child rent the house out? Absolutely. So if you plan ahead and work with us on our Gilfix and the Pole Dynasty LLC process, absolutely the house can be rented out. Your child can live there or they can rent it out. It doesn't matter. We have techniques that really take that out of the equation. If you don't do Prop 19 planning and your child's relying on that $1 million in protection, they move in, they get that $1 million in protection from a reassessment. If they move out later and the county finds out about it, we believe there would be a full reassessment at that time. So if your kid ever wants to rent your house out, you have to do planning ahead of time. I mean, Prop 19 has no exceptions. That if the kid lives there for a while and then moves out, there's nothing in the law about that. So we believe it could still be reassessed even later if your child rents the house out. But we absolutely can protect against that. Here's a question from Caroline. If the kids move into the family home within 1 year, can they bring in roommates or can they add an ADU? Does Prop 19 have an impact on either of those? Absolutely. Absolutely, they can. So does it, so first of all, this you're talking about just the $1 million in protection. As long as your kid's living there, if they have other people living there, that's fine. If they have an AD, if they add an ADU, I think there might be a partial reassessment just from the ADU. That's independent of Prop 19. So if you're just doing the 1 year, if a child moving in within 1 year, I don't think it matters if other people move in with them. But again, that only protects $1 million. And if they ever move out, it could get fully reassessed. Adding an ADU would probably result in a minor increase in property taxes no matter what. So it would be a reassessment. And so when Susan had a question, what if a rental property is currently in an LLC? Well, LLCs can be used for multiple purposes. And this also, I think, relates to another question. Can you give some examples of how you can avoid Prop 19? So we typically use combinations of sophisticated trusts with specially designed entities. There are, without going into too many details, there are a lot of very hard to understand rules in California that we can use though to your benefit, where we can use certain types of entities. If you have an LLC, maybe that can be part of the solution. But an LLC by itself doesn't protect your family. It's how an LLC might be used. And typically when we're working with families, the process takes a long time. It's multiple steps. There are risks in doing it. If something happens to you in the middle of the process, you might not get the benefit. It is so critical that you start the planning right away. If you're worried about this, don't wait. If you become incapacitated, or God forbid you pass away, you might lose the opportunity forever. If you have parents leaving properties to you or grandparents leaving property to your parents, you might inherit property later. We've had a lot of adults come to us and say, I'm going to inherit my parents' house in Mountain View or San Mateo or Palo Alto. They don't know about this. I do. They will pay for the legal services to protect the house. And mom and dad will technically be the clients, but they will say, I will pay for you guys to do this. I'm the one who's going to face a tax increase. So typically entities are involved in the planning, but again, there's no one size fits all approach. We have to be aware of capital gains taxes, property taxes, and estate taxes. You don't want a solution where your kids lose on the stepped up cost basis when you pass away. So we've seen some solutions proposed where, yeah, they might be able to keep property taxes low, but your kids won't get that stepped up cost basis. So if they ever sell the property in the future, get up hundreds of thousands of dollars in capital gains tax exposure. So we can solve from multiple issues. And we always take that into account when we're working with families. And how long does a child have to? So Barbara's question is, let's say you're taking you're relying on the moving in within 1 year to get that $1 million in protection. How long does the kid have to live there to qualify? There's nothing actually in the law about that. But as I said, they might qualify, but technically, if they move out, the house can be reassessed. So I don't think I don't think there's any minimum time to qualify. But if they move out, it could get reassessed. So it's not like so basically our understanding, and if you see, we're still doing research on this side of it, but our goal is to take Prop 19 totally out of the equation. If your kids are relying on Prop 19, we believe that even if they get that $1 million in protection from moving in within a year, if they move out, they could be exposed to a full reassessment at that time if they convert it to a rental and they're not living there anymore. So again, I don't know. I'm not sure of how the state's treating that yet. There may be some answers out there. I don't know exactly, but it's a risk, So either way, it's a big risk. And how long does the plan take to do this? So as I said, I know I keep harping on that. We're lawyers. Every situation is different. We count on it taking 6 months to over a year, complete the process. We can't do it all at once. In most situations, it takes multiple steps over time. And it's very, very technical. And we actually say if clients hire us for this type of planning, we forbid them from talking to the assessor's office or talking to the county. It's like everything goes to us. We need to make sure everything is done properly because minor mistakes and miscommunications can result in massive problems. So I think I'm going to wrap up now. I think the main question, so I thank everybody so much for being here. I have a few more questions, but unfortunately I have to run and I want to be respectful of your time. Prop 19 is not getting repealed. Spread the word for those who were like, I don't think this is going to stay law. Everybody's pissed off about it. It's law and it's going to stay law. You can rely, hope is not a strategy. Let's control what we can control. Even if your kids might move into your house and that might be enough, if they ever move out, the house could be exposed to a full reassessment in the future unless we take steps to plan. And our solutions can essentially lock in your low property taxes, whether or not your kids live there, whether they live there for a while and move out or not. But just let your friends and family know there are solutions out there. Talk to us. We're helping so many families with this, and just take action. I mean, we're talking about 6 to 7 figure increases in property taxes. I'm always amazed. We had some clients, not to call anybody out, with large estates, and we were like, "Hey, this can be a massive increase in taxes," and they say, I don't want to pay legal bills." It's like, I don't know what more I can do. The return on investment could be like 1,000% or more, but I get it. Some people don't like to pay lawyers. So we are pitching that we can help you with this, and you do have to pay us for it, but we can show you how much value it can deliver. But either way, be aware of this. We have rent control spreading, maybe an elimination of rent control protections for single family homes on the ballot. There's another ballot measure I didn't even talk about that hopes to make it easier to increase taxes in California. So while people are pissed about Prop 19, I don't think it's going to get repealed anytime soon. It's not getting repealed this year. So check out our Gilfix Law YouTube channel for more, but contact us at gilfix.com if you want to explore this in more detail with us. We can very efficiently go through the issue with you and for you and identify the different types of solutions that we have. So thank you so much. I hope you're having a great day. As my mom likes to say, I hope everybody's staying safe, sane, and healthy. Thank you so much. Stay in touch with us, gilfix.com. Easy to find us. I'm Mark Gilfix. Hope everybody's good. I'll talk to you soon.